Welcome to Tori's Wolf Fantasies. I'm so glad you found your way to our pack tonight. Before we dive into this heart-wrenching journey of betrayal and fate, drop a comment below and let me know which part of the world you're watching from. I love seeing how far our pack reaches. And if you're ready to get lost in a world of alphas and destiny, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Now let's begin.
The silence was the worst part. It wasn't the peaceful silence of a winter night. It was the heavy, suffocating kind that follows a scream. I couldn't feel my legs. My head was pinned against the cold glass of the passenger window, and the smell of gasoline and burnt rubber was making me lightheaded. Every breath I took felt like I was swallowing shards of ice. "Mark," I rasped. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Someone dying. The driver's side door groaned, a sharp metallic shriek that set my teeth on edge. I saw him. Mark. My fiancé. The man who had promised to love me until his last breath, looking at me through the shattered windshield. He had a scratch on his forehead, but he was moving. He was okay. "Mark. Help," I choked out, a sob bubbling in my chest. He didn't move toward me. He stood in the black ice, the wind whipping his expensive coat around his knees. He looked at the mangled front of the car, then at the dark pine-shadowed road behind him. Then he looked at me. His eyes weren't filled with love. They were filled with a cold, jagged terror that made my heart stop. "I can't, Lena," he whispered. The wind almost ate the words, but I heard them. "The car, it's going to blow. I have to get help. I have to go. Mark, please. I'm stuck. My door. It won't open." I reached out a hand, my fingers trembling and stained dark with blood. He took a step back. Then another. "I'll find someone," he lied. I could see the lie in the way his shoulders hunched. He wasn't going for help. He was running. He was leaving me in the wreckage of our life together because he was a coward. "Mark," I screamed, but the effort sent a flare of agony through my ribs. He turned and ran into the white abyss of the blizzard. He didn't look back once. I was alone. The heater had died and the Colorado frost began to creep across the dashboard. I watched the snow settle on my engagement ring, a diamond that felt like a lead weight on my finger. My vision began to blur, the edges of the world turning gray. I was going to die in the dark. Then the car jolted. It wasn't a small movement. The entire frame of the SUV groaned as if a giant had laid hands on it. Through the frost-covered glass, a shadow blocked out the moon. He was massive. A silhouette so broad it seemed to swallow the storm itself. The door, the one that had been crushed shut by the impact, was ripped off its hinges with a sickening roar of metal. I looked up, my eyelashes heavy with ice. I saw eyes first. Not human eyes. They were the color of molten gold, burning with a heat that seemed to melt the air between us. He reached in, and when his hands touched my skin, a jolt of electricity, pure, raw, and terrifyingly hot, shook me to my core. "I have you," he growled. His voice was a low vibration that I felt in my bones more than I heard in my ears. As he pulled me into the freezing night, tucking my head against the hard, warm muscle of his chest, I didn't feel cold anymore. I felt recognized, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place after a lifetime of being lost. "Sleep, Lena," he murmured against my hair. The last thing I felt was the rhythmic thud of a heart that sounded like a war drum, and the scent of pine needles and something dangerously masculine. Chapter 1. I woke up to the sound of a fire. It was a soft, rhythmic crackle, accompanied by the smell of cedarwood and expensive leather. For a second I thought I was back in the mountain cabin Mark and I had rented. I tried to sit up, but a sharp sting in my side forced me back down with a gasp. "Easy. You have 2 cracked ribs and a concussion that would have killed a lesser woman." The voice was dark silk. I turned my head, squinting against the soft amber light of the room. A man sat in a heavy wingback chair by the hearth. He was tall. Even sitting down, his presence filled the cavernous room. He wore a simple black sweater pushed up at the sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle and faint, jagged scars. His face was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. High cheekbones, a jawline that looked like it had been carved from the very mountains outside, and those eyes. The gold was gone, replaced by a deep, stormy hazel, but the intensity remained. "Where am I?" I whispered. My throat felt like it had been scraped with sandpaper. "My home. In the high country," he said, rising to his feet. He moved with a predatory grace that made the hair on my arms stand up. He walked to the bedside and handed me a glass of water. Our fingers brushed. The spark was back. It was a physical hum, a throb of heat that started at my fingertips and raced straight to my lower belly. I looked up at him, startled, and found him staring at me with a hunger so raw it made me forget how to breathe. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Adrian Volkov," he said. He didn't look away. "And you are Lena. You've been asleep for 2 days." 2 days. I panicked, trying to move again. "I have to call someone. My fiancé. He went for help. He must be out of his mind with worry." Adrian's expression shifted. His eyes darkened, a flash of that molten gold returning for a split second. A low, rumbling sound came from deep in his chest, a growl so quiet I almost thought I imagined it. "The man who left you to freeze?" Adrian asked, his voice dropping an octave. "He isn't looking for you, Lena. He's back in Denver telling the police that the storm took you before he could reach the car." The truth hit me like a second car crash. Mark had reported me dead. He had moved on to save his own skin. "How do you know that?" I asked, tears stinging my eyes. Adrian stepped closer, leaning over the bed. He placed a hand on the mattress on either side of my shoulders, pinning me with his gaze. He was so close I could feel the heat radiating off his body. It was like standing next to a furnace. "I know everything that happens in these mountains," he whispered. His scent was everywhere now, wild, clean, and intoxicating. "You're safe here. But you're not going back to him. Not ever." There was a possessiveness in his tone that should have terrified me. I was a stranger in a reclusive billionaire's house, injured and alone. But as I looked into Adrian's eyes, my heart didn't race with fear. It thudded with an ancient, heavy longing. Outside the window, a chorus of wolves began to howl, the sound echoing through the valley. Sounded like a salute. Adrian didn't flinch. He just kept watching me, his gaze dropping to my lips for a fraction of a second, long enough for me to feel a phantom pressure there. "Rest," he commanded softly. "The snow is deep and the world thinks you're a ghost. For now, stay a ghost with me." The recovery was slow, but the silence of the estate was louder than any noise I'd known in the city. Adrian's home was a sprawling fortress of glass and dark timber, perched on a cliffside where the wind sang through the pines. It was beautiful, but it felt like a gilded cage, one where the bars were made of my own weakness. I spent my afternoons in a sun-drenched library trying to focus on books, but my eyes always strayed to the window. The woods were thick with shadows that didn't seem to stay still. Huge, dark shapes moved between the trees and eyes, dozens of them, flickered in the undergrowth, always watching the house. "They won't hurt you." I jumped, my heart hammering against my healing ribs. Adrian stood in the doorway, framed by the sunset. He was dressed for the cold in a heavy shearling jacket that made his shoulders look impossibly broad. "The wolves?" asked my voice small. "There are so many of them. I've never seen a pack stay so close to a house before." Adrian walked toward me, his boots heavy on the hardwood. He didn't stop until he was standing directly in my space. He reached out, his large, calloused hand hovering near my face before his thumb brushed a stray hair away from my temple. His touch was electric, a searing contrast to the winter chill pressing against the glass. "They're waiting," he murmured. His voice had that gravelly low vibration again. "For what?" His hazel eyes searched mine, intense and unblinking. "For their queen to wake up." I laughed, a nervous, shaky sound. "Adrian, I think the concussion was worse than you thought. I'm just a girl from the suburbs who got lucky in a snowstorm." He didn't laugh back. He leaned in, his shadow falling over me, surrounding me with the scent of wood smoke and rain. He placed his hand on the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in the hair at my nape. The heat from his palm sent a wave of liquid fire down my spine. I should have pulled away, but my body felt heavy, drawn to him like a moth to a flame. "You feel it, don't you?" he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. "The way your blood hums when I'm near. The way your heart beats in time with mine." My breath hitched. I could feel the thud of his pulse in his fingertips. It was true. Ever since the crash I felt heightened. My senses were sharper. I could hear the rustle of the wind a mile away. I could smell the ozone in the air before the snow fell. And I could feel him. Every cell in my body was screaming to get closer to him. He leaned down, his nose grazing the sensitive skin of my neck. I let out a soft, broken moan, my eyes fluttering shut. His lips didn't touch me, but the proximity, the sheer raw tension of it, made my knees weak. He inhaled deeply as if he were memorizing my scent. "You smell like winter lilies and moonlight," he growled against my skin. "I've been tracking that scent for months, Lena. Long before the car hit the ice." I opened my eyes, my head spinning. "What? How?" Adrian pulled back just an inch, his face a mask of controlled torment. "The world you knew was a lie. Mark wasn't just a coward, he was a distraction. They kept you hidden in the human world to keep you from your birthright. To keep me from finding you." "Adrian, you're scaring me," I breathed, though it wasn't fear. It was a terrifying kind of excitement. "I'm the Alpha King, Lena," he said, his voice dropping to a primal rasp. "And you are the lost heir to the Luna throne. The crash wasn't an accident. It was a hit. They tried to kill the only woman who could lead the packs by my side." Before I could process the madness of his words, a glass-shattering howl ripped through the air, not from the woods but from just outside the library terrace. Adrian's grip on my neck tightened protectively. His eyes shifted, the hazel bleeding into a terrifying, brilliant gold. "They're here," he snarled. "Who?" I gasped. "The ones who sent your fiancé to lead you to your grave." He didn't let go of me. Instead, he pulled me flush against his chest, his arm wrapping around my waist like an iron band. Through the window, I saw them. 3 men in tactical gear stepping out of the treeline, their eyes glowing with the same unnatural light as Adrian's. And standing behind them, looking pale and nauseous in his designer hiking boots, was Mark. Chapter 3. The air in the room didn't just turn cold. It turned lethal. Adrian didn't move, but I felt the change in him. His muscles went from granite to something harder, something ancient and dangerous. He pulled me behind him, his body a literal wall between me and the window. "Mark," I whispered, the name tasting like ash. My ex-fiancé stood on the edge of the terrace, his breath hitching in the frigid air. He looked pathetic next to the men flanking him. They were dressed in dark, tactical gear, but their eyes gave them away. That same predator's glow I saw in Adrian was mirrored in them, though theirs felt oily, tainted. "Lena," Mark called out, his voice cracking. He stepped forward, his hands raised in a fake gesture of peace. "Thank God you're alive. I've been looking everywhere. I thought you were gone." "You left me," I said, my voice shaking as I stepped out from behind Adrian's shadow. "I watched you run, Mark. I watched you look at me and decide my life wasn't worth the effort of opening a door." Mark flinched, his eyes darting to the men beside him. "You don't understand. I was panicked. These men, they found me. They told me they could save you." "He's lying, Lena." Adrian's voice was a low, vibrating snarl. He didn't look at Mark, he looked at the wolves. "He didn't find them. He was working for them. He was paid to drive you into that storm." The betrayal felt like a fresh wound. I looked at Mark, really looked at him, and saw the truth in the way he couldn't hold my gaze. The wedding, the lawyer job, the perfect life in Colorado. It had all been a setup. "Why?" I choked out. One of the men in tactical gear stepped forward, a cruel smirk twisting his lips. "Because a Luna without a throne is just a girl. But a Luna in the ground? That's an end to a bloodline we've been trying to snuff out for 20 years. Adrian moved then. It was too fast for human eyes. One second he was beside me and the next he was at the glass doors. The very air seemed to crackle around him. "You've stepped onto my land," Adrian said, his voice dropping into a register that made the floorboards vibrate. "You've threatened my mate." The word mate hit me like a physical blow. It was more than a title. It was a claim. A promise. "She's not yours yet, Volkov," the lead attacker spat. "She hasn't been claimed. She hasn't even shifted." Adrian turned back to me for a split second. The golden fire in his eyes was blinding now, but when he looked at me, it softened into something so intense it felt like a caress. "Stay inside," he commanded. He stepped out onto the terrace and I watched in terrified awe as his body began to change. His bones snapped and reformed with the sound of breaking dry wood. His sweater tore as his muscles expanded, thick silver-black fur erupting from his skin. Within heartbeats, a wolf the size of a small horse stood where the man had been. He was magnificent. A shadow of teeth and claws. The attackers shifted too, but they were smaller, scrawnier. They looked like street curs compared to a king. The fight was a blur of snarling and snow. Adrian was a whirlwind of violence, protecting the threshold of the house with a ferocity that made my soul ache. He wasn't just fighting, he was punishing them. Mark did what he did best. He turned to run. But this time I didn't watch him leave. A strange heat began to boil in my own chest. It started at the base of my spine and flooded my veins, making my vision sharpen until I could see the individual flakes of snow falling outside. My heartbeat slowed, becoming a heavy, rhythmic thrum. I walked to the door and pushed it open. The freezing wind didn't make me shiver. It felt like a homecoming. "Mark!" I yelled. He stopped, turning back with terror in his eyes. I didn't have Adrian's strength, not yet, but as I stood there, the wolves in the yard froze. Even Adrian, his muzzle dripping with the blood of his enemies, turned to look at me. They weren't looking at a victim. They were looking at the Luna. "If you ever show your face near me again," I said, my voice sounding deeper, layered with a power I didn't recognize, "I won't let the Alpha kill you. I'll do it myself." Mark tumbled backward, tripping over his own feet and scrambled into the darkness of the pines. The remaining attackers, seeing their leader pinned under Adrian's massive paw, let out whimpers of submission. They realized too late whose house they had tried to storm. Adrian shifted back. He didn't care that he was bare-chested in the sub-zero temperature. He didn't care about the blood on his hands. He walked toward me, his chest heaving, his eyes searching mine for any sign of fear. He stopped inches from me. The smell of the fight, iron and wet fur, should have repelled me, but it drew me in. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and pressed my palm against his warm, blood-streaked chest. The connection was deafening. It felt like a circuit closing. "Lena," he breathed, his voice raw. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. We stood there in the wreckage of the terrace, the snow falling around us like ash. "You're starting to remember," he whispered. "Your wolf is waking up." "I felt it," I admitted, my voice a breathy skip. "The heat. The hunger." He tilted my chin up, his thumb grazing my lower lip. His gaze was so heavy, so full of 1,000 years of waiting, that I felt my knees give way. He caught me, pulling me flush against his heat. "I've waited a lifetime to find you," he murmured, his face inches from mine. "I won't let you go again." His breath hitched as he looked at my mouth. The tension between us was a living thing, a cord stretched to its breaking point. Just as his lips brushed mine, a ghost of a touch that sent a jolt of pure lightning through my core, a low, mournful howl echoed from deep in the forest. Adrian stiffened. He pulled back just enough to look toward the trees. "The elders," he hissed. "They know you've been found. And they're coming to claim their queen." Chapter 4. The library was no longer a sanctuary. It was a war room. Adrian hadn't left my side since the skirmish on the terrace. He paced the length of the rug, a restless predator confined by four walls. Every few minutes he would stop, his head tilting as he caught a scent or a sound from the miles of forest surrounding us. "The elders don't just visit, Lena," he said, his voice tight with an edge I hadn't heard before. "They come to judge. They've held the regency of the northern pack since your parents were murdered. They aren't going to hand over the keys to the kingdom just because I found you in a ditch." I sat on the edge of the velvet sofa, wrapping my arms around myself. The heat in my blood hadn't faded. It had settled into a low, constant simmer. "You said I'm the heir. If the bloodline is real, what is there to judge?" Adrian stopped in front of me. He dropped to his haunches, forcing me to look at him. He took my hands in his, and the sheer size of them, the way they completely swallowed mine, made me feel a strange sense of peace. "They'll want to see your wolf, Lena," he whispered. "And they'll want to know if our bond is true. If they think I'm just using you to solidify my own power, they'll take you from me. They'll put you in a protected facility until they can marry you off to someone they control." The thought of being handled like a piece of property again, first by Mark, now by these faceless elders, made a growl ripple through my chest. It was a low, vibrating sound that didn't feel human. Adrian's eyes flared gold. A slow, dark smirk spread across his face. "There she is," he murmured. He moved closer, his knees bumping against mine. He slid his hands up my arms, his touch leaving trails of fire on my skin. He stopped at my shoulders, his thumbs tracing the line of my collarbone. I could feel his hunger, a thick, heavy cloud of desire that made my head light. "How do we prove it?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. The bond. Adrian's gaze dropped to my lips. His thumb moved to the corner of my mouth, tugging slightly on my lower lip. The air in the room felt like it was being sucked out. The bond is proven through the mark, he said, his voice a primal rasp. But it has to be a choice. Your choice. I won't claim you just to win a political war, Lena. I want all of you. Your soul, your wolf, your heart. He leaned in, the tip of his nose brushing against mine. My breath hitched, my lungs hitching as I inhaled the scent of him. Moss, rain-drenched earth, and a masculine heat that made my skin ache for contact. I reached up, my fingers tangling in the thick, dark hair at the nape of his neck. I pulled him closer, closing the final inch. The kiss wasn't soft. It was a collision. Tasted like a storm. His tongue invaded my mouth with a possessive rhythm that made my toes curl into the carpet. It was deep, hungry, and desperate, as if he were trying to pour every year of his loneliness into me. I moaned into his mouth, my hands clenching in his hair, pulling him harder against me until there wasn't a sliver of light between our bodies. Everywhere we touched, the world seemed to dissolve. There was only the friction of his lips, the heat of his skin, and the wild, frantic beating of two hearts becoming one. He tore his mouth away, gasping for air, his forehead resting against mine. His chest was heaving, his hazel eyes completely gone, replaced by the molten gold of his wolf. Lena, he groaned, his voice a jagged edge. If I don't stop now, I won't be able to stop at all. Before I could answer, a heavy rhythmic thud echoed through the house. 3 times. The front doors. Adrian stiffened, his body turning into a pillar of ice. He stood up, pulling me with him, his grip on my hand almost bruising. They're here, he said, his voice flat and cold. We walked to the great hall. Standing in the center of the room were 3 figures draped in heavy, charcoal-colored wool. They looked like they had stepped out of a centuries-old painting. The woman in the center had hair as white as the snow outside and eyes that looked like shattered flint. Adrian Volkov, she said, her voice like the grinding of stones. You have something that belongs to the Pax. Adrian stepped forward, partially shielding me. I have the Luna. And she belongs to no one but herself. The old woman stepped closer, her gaze sliding over me with the clinical coldness of a butcher. She looks like a human. He smells like a human. And she carries the scent of your desperation, Alpha. She looked at me directly. Lena Carter. If you are truly the daughter of the crescent moon, prove it. Show us the wolf or we take you tonight. The room went silent. I looked at Adrian, seeing the agony in his eyes. He couldn't help me. This was the one thing he couldn't do for me. I closed my eyes. I reached deep inside, past the fear, past the memory of the car crash and Mark's betrayal. I looked for the heat. I looked for the fire that had flared when I saw the attackers on the terrace. Come on, I pleaded silently. Wake up. For a long moment, there was nothing but the sound of the wind. Then a sharp, white-hot pain lanced through my spine. My skin felt too tight, my bones felt like they were turning into liquid fire. I fell to my knees, a scream building in my throat, but what came out wasn't a human sound. It was a howl that shook the very foundations of the mountain. Chapter 5. The pain wasn't like the car crash. That had been cold and sharp. This was an explosion. It felt like my soul was too big for my skin, stretching me, breaking me, remaking me in the span of a single heartbeat. I heard the crack of my own ribs, but it didn't hurt. It felt like a release. When my vision cleared, the world was different. The great hall was no longer dim. I could see the microscopic dust motes dancing in the air. I could hear the blood rushing through the elders' veins, a rhythmic thump swish that sounded like a drum. But mostly I could smell Adrian. He smelled like home. Like a forest after a fire. I looked down at my paws. They were vast, covered in fur so white it made the mountain snow look gray. The white-haired elder, Silas, took a step back, her flint-colored eyes widening. For the first time, the mask of cold authority cracked. The White Luna, she whispered, her voice trembling. The legend was true. I let out a low, vibrating growl that rattled the windows. I didn't need words to tell them to back away from my mate. The instinct was primal, a tidal wave of protectiveness that crashed over me. Adrian was on his knees in front of me, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated awe. He reached out a hand, his fingers hovering just inches from my silver-white muzzle. Lena, he breathed. Beautiful. I nudged my head into his palm, the contact sending a rush of warmth through my new form. But the moment of peace was shattered. "It doesn't matter," Silas snapped, recovering her bite. "The bloodline is confirmed, yes. But a queen cannot rule with a king who cannot protect her. The breach at the terrace proves your security is failing, Volkov. The girl comes with us to the High Council until she is properly trained." Adrian stood up, his height dwarfing the old woman. "She isn't a girl, and she isn't leaving. If you try to take her, you'll have to go through every wolf in the northern pack. Including me." "Then you choose war?" Silas challenged. Before Adrian could answer, a scent hit me. A sour, metallic smell I recognized from the bottom of a dark mountain pass. Gasoline. Sweat. Cowardice. Mark. He wasn't alone. I could hear the crunch of boots on the driveway, dozens of them. The elders weren't just here to judge. They were the distraction. They had brought the rest of the splinter pack with them, the ones who had wanted me dead from the start. I didn't wait for Adrian to give an order. I lunged. I didn't head for the elders. I crashed through the heavy oak doors, the wood splintering like matchsticks under my weight. The cold air hit my fur, and for the first time in my life I felt truly powerful. There in the driveway stood Mark. He was holding a silver-tipped crossbow, his hands shaking so violently the bolt was dancing. Behind him were 20 wolves, their hackles raised, their eyes glowing with a sickly, desperate yellow. "Stay back!" Mark screamed, his voice jumping an octave. "I know what you are now. You're a monster. You're not Lena." I padded toward him, slow and deliberate. Every step I took was a promise of retribution. My wolf didn't just want him gone. She wanted him to feel the fear I had felt when the ice began to creep into the car. "Kill it!" Mark shrieked to the wolves behind him. "Kill the beast." The splinter wolves lunged, a sea of brown and gray fur. But they were small. They were weak. I met the first one midair, my jaws snapping shut on its shoulder. The taste of copper filled my mouth, and I tossed the wolf aside as if it weighed nothing. Then a blur of black and silver erupted from the house behind me. Drink. He didn't shift. He moved in his human form, a whirlwind of violence. He intercepted 2 wolves at once, his bare hands snapping necks with sickening precision. He was a god of war, his eyes burning with a golden light that outshone the moon. I turned back to Mark. He had dropped the crossbow and was scrambling toward a black SUV. I was faster. I leaped, my weight slamming into the hood of the car just as he reached for the handle. The metal buckled under my paws, the glass of the windshield shattering. Mark fell into the snow, looking up at me with eyes that were finally, truly seeing the woman he had tried to kill. I leaned down, my hot breath melting the frost on his jacket. I pulled back my lips, revealing teeth the size of daggers. "Run," my mind projected into his, a command layered with the power of 1,000 lunas. "Run until your lungs burn. If I ever see you again, I won't be so merciful." He didn't need a second warning. He scrambled up and sprinted into the dark woods, a pathetic shadow in the vastness of the night. I turned back to the driveway. The splinter wolves were retreating, seeing their brothers broken in the snow and the Alpha King standing tall. Adrian stood in the center of the wreckage, his chest bare, his knuckles dripping red. He looked at me, and for a moment the world stopped. I shifted back. It was faster this time, the skin-to-fur transition smooth and natural. I stood there, shivering slightly in the biting wind, completely exposed. Adrian was there in a heartbeat. He stripped off his heavy coat and wrapped it around me, pulling me into the furnace of his body. He tucked my head under his chin, his hands shaking as he held me. "You did it," he whispered into my hair. "You claimed your throne." I looked toward the house. The elders stood on the porch, their faces pale. Silas bowed her head, not a gesture of love but one of absolute submission. "The Luna has spoken," she called out, her voice carrying through the valley. Adrian pulled back, his hands cupping my face. His thumbs traced the line of my jaw, his touch so tender it brought tears to my eyes. "They're going to want a ceremony," he murmured, his hazel eyes dark with a different kind of hunger. "They're going to want to see the king and queen united." "And what do you want, Adrian?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He leaned in, his lips hovering just a hair's breadth from mine. "I want the woman who survived the snow," he breathed. "I want you." He kissed me then, and it wasn't a battle this time. It was a surrender. It was the taste of a future I never knew I could have. But as we stood there, the howling of the pack rising in a triumphant chorus. A single high-pitched whistle cut through the air. A drone. Adrian looked up, his jaw tightening. "It's not over," he hissed. "They aren't just wolves anymore, Lena. They have human allies. And they know exactly where we are." Chapter 6. The drone was a tiny, buzzing insect against the vast, star-pricked sky, but it represented a world I thought I'd left behind. It was the reminder that Mark and his handlers weren't just playing at being monsters. They had the cold, calculated reach of modern malice. "Inside. Now," Adrian commanded. He didn't lead me to the library or the hall. He took me deep into the stone heart of the fortress, to a room where the walls were thick enough to dampen the sound of the world. It was his private study, a space that smelled intensely of him. Old books, expensive scotch, and that wild underlying scent of the alpha. He locked the heavy oak door and turned to me. His eyes were still rimmed with gold, his adrenaline humming so loud I could feel it vibrating in the air between us. "They won't stop," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline crash. "The humans who want the Luna bloodline. They have resources. Technology." Adrian walked over to a safe hidden behind a tapestry, pulling out a heavy leather-bound case. "They have machines," he growled, "but we have the mountain. And now we have you." He set the case on his desk and opened it. Inside lay a heavy silver cuff, etched with ancient runes that seemed to glow faintly in the low light. "My mother's," he said softly. "It's a dampener. It was designed to hide a Luna's scent from those who would hunt her. Your parents must have had something similar for you when you were a child, but it likely broke or was taken when they were killed." He picked up the cuff and stepped toward me. The air grew heavy. This was the final step, not just a political union but a spiritual one. To wear the cuff was to accept the protection of the Northern Alpha King. "If I put this on you," Adrian whispered, his gaze dropping to my wrist, "you'll be invisible to their sensors. But you'll also be tethered to me. Our bond will be the only thing that can find you." I looked at the silver, then at him. My life as Lena Carter, the girl who married a lawyer and lived a quiet, safe life, was dead. She had died in the snow. The woman standing here was something else. Something stronger. "Tether me," I said. He slid the cuff over my right wrist. The metal was freezing for a second, then it flared with a sudden, searing heat. I gasped as a rush of images flooded my mind. The history of the packs, the scent of 1,000 forests, and the overwhelming soul-deep love Adrian felt for a girl he had tracked through the shadows for years. The connection snapped into place. I didn't just feel him, I was him. I felt the ache in his shoulder from the fight, the fierce pride in his chest, and the staggering desire that made his hands tremble as he held my arm. Adrian let out a ragged breath, pulling me into his chest. His hands slid down to my waist, crushing me against the hard lines of his body. "I can feel you," I whispered against his skin. "I can feel everything." "Then you know," he groaned, his voice a low, vibrating rumble in his throat. "You know I'd burn the world down to keep you safe." He tilted my head back, his eyes searching mine with a desperate, beautiful intensity. The sensual tension that had been building since he pulled me from the wreck finally shattered. He kissed me with a hunger that was no longer restrained. It was a claim. It was a promise. His lips moved to my neck, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin right over my pulse point. I arched into him, my fingers digging into the muscles of his back. Every touch was amplified by the bond, a symphony of sensation that made my soul roar. "Adrian," I breathed, my eyes fluttering shut. "You're mine," he growled against my skin, his voice primal and raw. "In this life and the next. Let them come with their drones and their silver. They'll find nothing but a king protecting his queen." He pulled back just enough to look me in the eyes. The gold in his gaze was steady now, a calm, eternal flame. "We have to move," he said, his voice returning to that of a leader. "The elders will stay to defend the front. We take the hidden passes to the high sanctuary. By dawn, the entire northern pack will be mobilized. We aren't hiding anymore, Lena. We're hunting." I looked at the silver cuff on my wrist, then back at the man who had saved me from the dark. I wasn't the rejected Omega the world thought I was. I wasn't a victim of a car crash. I was a Luna. And I was home. "Then let's go," I said, my voice firm. "I want to see the sun rise over our mountains." Adrian gripped my hand, his fingers locking with mine, And together we walked out of the study and into the cold, beautiful night. The hunt was on, but for the first time in my life I wasn't the prey. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through The Alpha Who Found Me in the Snow, here on Tori's Wolf Fantasies. If you loved Lena and Adrian's story, make sure to like this video and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new pack update. Until next time, stay wild.